Welcome everyone to Council meeting on Monday 27th of September 2021. My name is Beck Thomas and I'm the Mayor of Glenorchy City Council and the Chairperson of the meeting this evening. I'd like to acknowledge that we meet today on the land of the Muwinina people and acknowledge and pay respect to the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the traditional owners and ongoing custodian of this land of which we meet, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge that we did have a wonderful prayer provided to start our meeting by Pastor Peter Clark from the Claremont Baptist Church, who's unfortunately left us for the evening now, but I'd just like to note and acknowledge and thank Pastor Clark for his prayer. Joining me this evening in chambers is Alderman Peter Bull, Alderman Angela Ryan, Deputy Mayor Stephen King, General Manager Tony McMullen, Alderman Gay Richardson, Alderman Simon Fraser, Alderman Melissa Carlton and Alderman Sue Hickey. Joining us via Zoom is Dunsby, and we have apologies this evening from Alderman Kelly Sims. Item number 2 on our agenda is confirmation of minutes of the open meeting. So do I have someone to move that the minutes of the council meeting held on 30th of August 2021 be confirmed?
So
moved, Deputy Mayor. Someone to second? Alderman Fraser. Any discussion of the minutes?
not for me, Mayor.
Any further discussion of the minutes?
Alderman Dunsby.
Yes, Alderman Dunsby.
I'd just like to ask with the minutes where it's referenced the vote for the Deputy Mayor that it has one vote being listed as abstained. It's my understanding that we didn't have an option to abstain on the voting paper and that it may have been a paper that was submitted with no choice on it. If that was the case, I believe it should list as informal rather than abstained. In that particular instance, and perhaps the Executive Officer could confirm what was the actual situation so that the minutes can accurately reflect what was the decision of the person who voted.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Executive Officer.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Through you, Mayor, I think it's really a matter for the council to determine. Technically not voting on a vote where there was an option to vote counts as an abstention, so abstain, but it could also be an informal vote. It's really neither here nor there.
Okay, with agreement of the mover and the seconder, I would actually prefer to see that it does say that it was an informal vote, and happy for a discussion around the table.
I'm fine with that, if it makes a difference, yeah.
Deputy Mayor Stephen King is happy with that. Are you?
Yep, sure. Some semantics, but that's fine.
Alderman Ryan.
Sorry, I think it depends on the intention of the person who either abstained or voted informal, and we have no way of knowing what the intention of that person was because it was a secret vote. So I don't think we can say that it was informal if the person meant to abstain.
I think herein lies the issue that I have is that you didn't have a choice to abstain. So because we weren't able to indicate that, but for me, I believe it should indicate as an informal vote.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Dunsby. You've now spoken to the motion. Alderman Hickey.
I don't know why you abstained in that instance, but the thing was, it wasn't raised as a problem on the night. The minutes recorded as abstained, and I would prefer it stay as that because all the discussion that night was about the abstaining. So I don't know that we needed an informal vote.
Any further discussion of the item?
The minutes are a record of what happened on that evening.
Thank you, Alderman Ball. Can I just obtain clarification procedurally here, because we have a recommendation to approve the minutes. We didn't have a formal amendment motion or a alternative motion put. It was a question by Alderman Dunsby, so I'm just seeking clarification on how to address this matter, please.
Well, with the agreement of the mover and seconder, it's possible to amend the original motion. So if council is of a view to amend the original motion to include those words, that's possible. It's just then down to the will of the council.
Okay.
It really comes down to I guess, a situation where we cannot confirm whether or not the vote was informal. We can confirm that there was no vote recorded in respect of one of the votes. So we can confirm externally, just looking to the executive officer's lines here, but we can confirm externally that there was a situation where one individual didn't record a vote. We can't record that the vote was informal.
That's correct, General Manager.
But in any event, it's immaterial to the result of the vote.
Thank you. So just to clarify, we haven't had, am I right in thinking we haven't had an amended motion put?
I think Alderman Dunsby has sought the agreement of the mover and seconder to an amendment to the motion that would endorse the minutes, but with the word abstained in item 9 replaced by the word informal.
And they've granted that. So if other aldermen don't wish to support that, we need a foreshadowed motion. The original motion to be put as a foreshadowed motion.
Well, I'll foreshadow it then, hoping Alderman Ryan seconds it. Yes, that it should remain as it was declared on the night, and I think we're just semantics here with that word, but definitely somebody abstained.
Okay, so we don't need a seconder just yet. We'll decide on the amended motion first, and if that lapses, we'll go to the foreshadowed motion for a seconder. Is that right, General Manager?
Correct.
Okay, any further discussion on the amended motion? I will put it to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for the amended motion. Deputy Mayor and Alderman Dunsby. Against? That is Alderman Bull, Alderman Ryan, Mayor Thomas, Alderman Richardson, Alderman Fraser, Alderman Carlton and Alderman Hickey. The motion is lost. A foreshadowed motion from Alderman Hickey. Do I have someone to second the foreshadowed motion, the original motion? That's Alderman Ryan. Any discussion, Alderman Hickey?
No, I'm just concerned that, we shouldn't be changing things after the event unless, there was something raised on the night, a genuine concern about the issue.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Any further discussion of the item?
I'd just like to say that I need to support this motion because the minutes are a true record of what happened on the night. There was an announcement that somebody abstained, so I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Alderman Richardson. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. There's Alderman Bull, Alderman Ryan, Mayor Thomas, Alderman Richardson, Alderman Fraser, Alderman Carlton and Alderman Hickey. And against, Deputy Mayor King and Alderman Dunsby. The motion is carried. Moving on to item 3, announcements by the Chair. We had a few sporting achievements in our community over the last month. So congratulations to the Glenorchy Knights football team on their state premiership, the Glenorchy women's AFL team on their state premiership, and the Glenorchy Spartans basketball team on winning the championship. And also, as Deputy Mayor King has mentioned earlier, on ex-Glenorchy resident and at Glenorchy AFL football player Ben Brown on being part of the Melbourne Demons premiership team over the weekend. So great to see some sporting achievements in our community. Moving on to item 4, pecuniary interest notifications. Do any aldermen have any pecuniary interest on any items in tonight's agenda? Alderman Fraser.
Yeah, it's not a pecuniary interest, so I will declare a perceived conflict of interest for item 9.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. That is noted. Any further pecuniary interests or conflicts of interest? No? Thank you. Moving on to response to previous public questions taken on notice. So we had some questions on notice from Shane Alderton of Austin Ferry regarding the costs of the CBD revitalisation project. Because those works have just finished, we're still finalising the finances of the project. So we'll provide answers to your questions, Mr. Alderton, once the final costs have been determined, and of course we'll publish those in future minutes. The second questions are from Ms. Jan Bryan from Montrose. These were mistakenly not published in this month's agenda, so we apologise for that. Staff are getting the information together to be able to answer those questions, which are up there on the screen in relation to partnerships with sporting organisations and gambling. So we will provide answers to those questions to Ms. Bryan shortly and publish them in our next council agenda. Item 6, public question time. Our agenda, we had some questions provided on notice. Thank you, Mr. Steenbergen. That was submitted earlier in the month around meeting procedures. And the answers to those questions are published in our agenda around meeting procedures. We had some questions on notice more recently from Mr. Bob Holderness-Rodham about pedestrian refuges and some scheduled works at some of our reserves, and they are up there on our screen at the moment as well. I understand that council officers have written back to Mr. Holderness-Rodham seeking some clarification on his questions, so they've been taken on notice and we'll provide answers to those in our next council meeting agenda as well. Today we received 3 questions on notice from Janice Bryan of Montrose relating to some of our parks and play spaces, and they're coming up on the screen now as well. And I will provide an answer to question 1 in relation to the Gibbons play space contamination question now. So council did investigate contamination of Gibbons Park Reserve as part of the initial preliminary work on the project. A geotechnical assessment was conducted in 2020 and found that there were no human health guideline exceedances for the soil on the site, and the site is safe for construction work and continued use as a public open space. There were no potential environmental impacts identified from the excavation of the soil on the site. Question 2 is in relation to, at the council meeting on 27th of August 2012, the proposed transfer of the Montrose Community Foreshore Park was discussed in closed council. Could council confirm the Montrose Foreshore is still publicly owned land and assure the community it will remain in public hands as it is the community's most important and extensively used area for health and leisure activities? My answer is the August 2012 report was in relation to the potential transfer of foreshore land to council from the Crown and not any disposal of council land. The report sought approval for council staff to enter negotiations with the Tasmanian government to transfer land in the Montrose Bay area from Crown or state government ownership to council ownership and control. This was to allow the gas stage 1 works, which were funded by the state government, to progress and enable the construction of a shared pathway around the foreshore at Montrose, including a section of the pathway that crossed land leased by the Montrose Bay Yacht Club. The land was part of the Montrose Bay High School title and was administered by the Department of Primary Industries, Parks, Water and the Environment, or the Crown. This acquisition increased the land of the Montrose Community Foreshore Park, and the park is still public land. There are no plans to dispose of this public land, and if council was ever to decide to dispose of this land, it would be required to go through the Section 178 of the Local Government Act 1993 process, which involves a transparent community consultation process where objections to any disposal would be heard. Question 3 from Ms Bryan was, could council provide the community with an updated progress report on the North Chigwell Sporting Facility development as a result of the 2019 Community Development Grant? The answer is, in late 2018, council received advice of a federal government election commitment in response to lobbying by Football Tasmania for a $12.8 million grant from the Australian government to establish a junior soccer hub at North Chigwell Oval, which is the home of the Metro Football Club and is a council-owned facility. On review of the funding amount, council saw that there was potential to negotiate the reallocation of the funding to broaden the benefit to council-owned football facilities in the city. On that basis, there was a stakeholder negotiation for a 70%, 30% split, which would see $8.96 million allocated to the North Chigwell Junior Soccer Hub and the balance of $3.84 million allocated to KG5 Football Park for much needed facilities upgrades, such as replacement of the synthetic pitch and lighting upgrades. There were long delays in obtaining the funding agreement from the Australian Government owing to a restructure of the federal department and the need to obtain Deputy Prime Minister's approval for the funding split. After some agitating by council officers, a funding agreement was finally obtained in July 2021. However, upon review and after receiving legal advice, it was identified that the funding agreement did not provide sufficient protections to council around the government's disbursement of grant funds relative to project milestones, and further amendments were sought from the federal department. Meanwhile, council's project management team has proceeded with preliminary site investigations by commissioning reports into geotechnical, environmental conditions, access and egress issues, and other site surveys, and are compiling this information ready to lodge development applications. A quantity surveyor's estimate based on the preliminary concept design has also been commissioned. Council has recently received the revised funding agreement and is meeting with the relevant clubs to discuss progress, next steps in progressing these projects. A site analysis is also being undertaken by consultants at leisure to determine what is required and best suited for the North Chigwell Oval sporting facility. Thank you for those questions, Ms. Bryant. Those answers will be published in the minutes. So we do have obviously time remaining for public question time. So are there any further public questions tonight? Mr. Alderton.
Thank you, Mayor. For those viewing, Shane Williams, Spheric. I do have a follow-up question firstly regarding the CBD development, and I'll just give a bit of brief overview here on this. So during the election campaign, I'm an avid listener of Spoonman, and I was an avid follower of both your campaign, Sue's campaign, and Kelly's campaign, listening. You were on interview on Spoonman's radio show mentioning that council had invested $5.5 million in the CBD redevelopment. One would then, I guess, take into consideration the $500,000 that the state government provided, which gives us a broad figure back then during the election campaign of $5.6 million. I acknowledge you don't have a final figure to give me, but what does concern me is 6 days ago in the Mercury, they quoted that the CBD development came to a total cost of $5.8 million, and they quoted that they received that information from council sources. So my question is, in respect to my question not being able to be answered yet, and you're still calculating the sums, how and where would the Mercury obtain their figure of $5.8 million, and is that figure true and correct, or is that figure incorrect?
Thank you, Mr. Alderton, for your question. I might refer to the General Manager to talk about the information provided to the Mercury, please, and those estimates.
I'll just defer to the Executive Officer.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Alderton. Through you, Mayor. The information was provided to the Mercury through our communications team. We know that the approximate final cost of the CBD revitalisation project was $5.8 million, and I'm just seeking acknowledgement from the relevant director there. In answering your question, we hope to be able to provide you with a precise figure rather than the approximate one that's been provided to Mercury. But yes, that information provided to the Mercury is correct and was correct at the time it was published.
Right, okay. So at the time of the election campaign where you quoted 5.5, and then obviously you take into consideration the $500,000 from the state government, would it be fair to say that we've had a $200,000 blowout in costs since your interview with Spoonman?
No, I don't think it would be fair to say we've had a blowout in costs. So I think it would be perhaps more likely that I was making an estimation of my understanding of the cost of the project at the time, Mr. Alderton.
Right, okay, thank you very much. The rest of my questions tonight are probably more directed operationally, and I'll use, for example, agenda item 9 tonight, where you propose to dispose of some land at 4 and 8 Elm Corso. So reading through the agenda of that item, you talk about community engagement, and you talk about community engagement through the Let's Talk program. Can I ask why operationally, when these agenda items are published for both the community and the alderman to make very important decisions on, council doesn't include facts in there like how many people were engaged, a number. Why don't we see a number of X amount of, what the response was, how many people engaged through the Let's Talk program in regards to these agenda items when they come up for discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Alderton. My understanding is typically we do have a number provided in the reports of how many people respond through the Let's Talk platform, but I might throw to our Director of Community Development and Community Engagement to answer that question for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Alderton, for the question. Project officers are the ones who are responsible for reporting on each of the engagements that come forward and each of the projects that come forward. As project managers go through the process of engaging, they'll be guided by Council's community engagement policy and framework and supported by our community engagement officer. Depending on what the nature of the engagement is, it will depend on what's reported back. So, for example, the recent sport and recreation policy framework that's been coming forward to Council has gone through a range of different consultation activities from on the website, through Let's Talk, through to meeting with individual sporting clubs, through to meeting with, so there's courses for courses would be the way I describe that. So depending on what the engagement activities are is how they're reported in the reports. They may list some figures from Let's Talk, which is just one of our tools. They may report it in a different way.
Yeah, okay, understand. So in regards to Let's Talk, would you be able to conservatively tell me how many people have actually registered to participate in that program?
Through you, Mayor, if I may just ruffle my papers here for a moment, I might have the very answer to the question that Mr. Alderton has asked. If I can do it quickly. Thank you, Mr. Alderton. As you'd be aware, the Let's Talk toolkit is just one of our tools, so it's not the only way we engage. Council launched the platform, as you'd be aware, late last year in November 2020. And since then, I can report to you in quarterly steps going forward, we've had, in the first quarter that was launched, there were 1,400 people visit the site, then 2,300 people, 2,000 people, and in the last quarter it's been 1,800. Your question was how many people have registered those, so that's people looking at the site, having a look around. People who have actually registered to go forward and be continued to be contacted through that site. In the first quarter, there were 47. We then had 354 in the next quarter. The next quarter was another 197. And in this recent quarter, there's been another 104. So we're currently at 690 registrations just on that tool.
Right. And in all fairness, out of those 600, was it 90 registrations?
600, yes.
On average, how many would engage with the council in regards to these agenda items that keep coming up?
Again, through you, Mayor. Again, people who are registered on that particular tool would engage depending on their level of interest in the topic. So again, it depends on what's being asked on the website. It depends if I'm interested in a play space, depends if I'm interested in a sport and recreation strategy.
Acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But a broad term, would it be 1%, 2%, 3%?
Well, again, hard to give a percentage to it because it does depend on what it is. What I can tell you, again, and I haven't got the breakdown below this, but over those 4 quarters I talked about, people who actually engaged in a range of surveys, so this isn't one engagement, it's a total of engagements. In that first quarter, there were 101 people engaged in particular topics, then 411, then 294, and the last quarter, 348. And that varies, of course, that's not per engagement, it's across a range of projects.
Would it be fair to me to say, that was another question, if you're not registered, your response to particular items is somewhat restricted compared to somebody that's registered on Let's Talk, to the level of engagement and information and questions and input you can have. With the council, would you agree that if you are registered, you have a greater level of engagement than what you do if you're not registered, because you can really only participate in short survey type polls, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Alderman. Through you, Mayor. There are a range of ways of engaging with this tool. People may fully register, so I might put my name, my email address down and tick the box that says I'd like to know about all engagements going forward, and I would choose to be consulted or not on those things. There is another method of simply going on to that particular tool and just having a quick poll. So there might be a playground being consulted on, 5 questions, yes, no, red, blue, tick. So again, depending on the level of interest and depending on how much time I have to give to engagements would answer the question.
Right, okay. So one final question, sorry.
Final question, Mr. Alderton.
From an operational point of view of council, and these are operationally directed questions I'm asking tonight, does council recognise this as being a fair representation of the broader community, 40,000 ratepayers, through the Lex Talk app, considering the number of responses you're getting back on these items?
Thank you, Mr. Alderman. Through you, Mayor. Of course, again, depending on what council is engaging on, and there are a range of matters that council does talk to the community on, we would use a range of tools. Let's Talk is one tool that provides people an opportunity to talk back. So again, it comes back to horses for courses. If we were proposing to do something with Tolosa Park, for example, we may use, an obvious current example, we use a range of ways of talking with our community, and because of the regional significance of that park, we would expect a high level of engagement from our community.
I would too.
If we were, in response to if we were engaging about a small neighbourhood park, about replacement of equipment where it might affect a circle of 200-300 people around that park, we would expect that the level of engagement would be different, and probably the method of engaging with that local community would be different. So again, depending on what we're doing, depending on what the response should be.
Yeah. All
Thank
right.
you, Director.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Alderton.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any further public questions? Okay, moving on then to item 7, petitions, deputations. General Manager, do we have any this evening?
No, we don't, Mayor.
No petitions or deputations. Moving on to agenda item 8, announcements by the Mayor. We have a recommendation that Council receive and the announcements about the activities of me during the period 24th of August to 20th of September. Do I have someone to move that, please? Move, Deputy Mayor. Someone to second? Alderman Carlton, Deputy Mayor.
You've been busy, Mayor, and I'll take it as thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Carlton.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Mayor. I see on the amongst the many meetings you had with the community, there was one on the 2nd of September where you attended a CAS Glenorchy meeting. It's not a group that I'm familiar with. I'm just wondering if you can let us know which group that was, what that stands for.
That is a very good question, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's been inadvertently put in there, and that was actually a private commitment of mine, so I do apologise for that being included in there. I will cross that one out. It stood for Conversations About Suicide Training, which I facilitate in my private time, and of course put in my council diary so that nobody puts any meetings in during that time. And the wonderful Janina, who helps me prepare this, has inadvertently popped that one in there. So it stands for Conversations About Suicide, but it wasn't a council commitment. So thank you for picking that up.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any further discussion of the item? No? I'll put it to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That is carried unanimously. Item 9, investigation into the disposal by way of long-term lease of council land at 4 and 8 our Corso Drive, Veritas, Glenorchy City Bowls Club and Glenorchy Tennis Club. Have a number 3 recommendations there for council to consider. Do I have someone to move these recommendations? Oh, sorry, yes. Okay, there's a conflict of interest, perceived conflict of interest, so you no need to leave the room, but you won't participate in the debate or the vote. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for raising that. Someone to move? Recommendations, Alderman Richardson. Someone to second? Deputy Mayor, Alderman Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I'm more than happy to support the recommendations set out, the three of them, for the long-term lease of the golf club and the tennis club. It'll provide certainty for them for the future and facilitate pursuing funding. And also it falls in line with our open space strategy. So there appears not to be a lot of opposition to the proposal. So anybody who has any concerns with the long-term lease can still do so through the next stage of the process, and that will be reported back to council and the community. So I'm happy to open that up for discussion now.
Thank you, Alderman Richardson. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to support the recommendations. I did have a couple of quick questions. So I read with interest the plans that Glenorchy City Tennis Club have, as well as the Glenorchy City Bowls Club, and part of us going through this process is to give them a bit of certainty so that they're able to pursue some of those options. I did note that some of the actions that they're planning to undertake are supported in the Veridale master plan. And we do have another strategy that we're developing at the moment, which is the sport and rec strategy. And I just wanted to confirm that the actions that have been listed in the Veridale master plan around those two specific sport and recreation sites have been picked up in the sport and recreation strategy development. They're certainly in the open space, but if they haven't been in the sport and rec strategy to the level of detail that we see here, that just needs to be included in part of that strategy development. So just to check that they have been incorporated.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Yeah, Director Riali.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I can certainly make sure that they are actually picked up. However, I'm aware that the consultants did actually talk to both of these clubs in quite a lot of detail, so they would be aware of the actions and the plans. But I can confirm that they are picked up in that strategy.
Thank you. I feel a great deal of comfort to make sure that the particular master plan is mentioned in the strategy that's being worked on, and particularly the actions that are recommended, or what we're talking about here, are picked up in that strategy so that they're complement one another.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Alderman Hickey.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand under, this is on page 15, so that under section 178(3) of the Local Government Act, that we have to advertise the lease on 2 occasions in the daily newspaper circulating in the municipal area. So is that the, what's it called?
Gazette.
The Glenorchy Gazette, or is it the Mercury?
Mercury.
Yes, and I noticed also we've got on the boundary land, which is fine too, but I'm just wondering, given the people who no longer access mainstream media, is it, do we also advertise it through our own website as well, apart from the poll thing?
Not routinely, through you, Mayor, not routinely, but we certainly can do that.
Well, yes, perhaps we could, if that's okay, look at that at a workshop or something, and other ways of communicating with the community on issues such as this, as a form of advertising as the world has changed and Local Government Act hasn't kept up.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. We can certainly consider that website and Facebook page. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have the papers in front of me, but I can't open the attachments at the moment. The council papers don't actually state the period that we may be considering for the lease, other than it's more than 5 years. I just wonder if the general manager or the director could confirm what is potentially being considered.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. General Manager.
Through you, Mayor, it is subject to a negotiation, but I'll hand over to the director.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. It is subject to negotiation. The clubs would like a longer period of time because they are wanting to invest in the facilities, and I think gives them greater comfort and security to know that they have long tenure to actually spend grant funding or apply for grant funding. We'll be aiming for around that 10-year period, and that's the clubs have been made aware of that. That's around the time that we would be suggesting, but we're still open to discussions with the clubs.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion of the item? I'll put the recommendations to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That is Alderman Ball, Alderman Ryan, Deputy Mayor King, Mayor Thomas, Alderman Richardson, Alderman Carlton, Alderman Hickey and Alderman Dunsby, and I know Alderman Fraser did not participate in the vote. That recommendation is carried. Moving on to item 10, Waste Services Policy. I have a recommendation that Council adopt the updated Waste Services Policy in the form of attachment 2. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Alderman Hickey, someone to second? Deputy Mayor, Alderman Hickey.
No, I think it's, the amendments are good and in line with best practice, so I'm happy with that.
Any further discussion of the item? Deputy Mayor?
Just echo Alderman Hickey's comments. I think, as I say, the recommendation is good, the change is good, and good process.
Alderman Dunsby. Oh, you're on.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for the Director, if I may.
Sure.
Just swapping screens, just bear with me,
No
please.
worries.
There were a couple of areas within the policy that I just wanted to see some clarification, and I'd like to foreshadow potentially changing the policy if these can be accommodated. So one of my questions was, we've ensured that people with special circumstances can apply to have a bin upgrade. We didn't talk about people that may need a bin downgrade. So I wanted to have some flexibility within the policy. So that, sorry, the policy only talked about a downgrade, but some people may need an upgrade. Some people have a specific waste circumstances that may be around medical type waste, without it being medical waste, that they may require a bin upgrade. And I'd like to see the policy allows council with appropriate medical certificates or whatever to be able to accommodate those circumstances. I'm aware that council currently does that now, not for some people, and I'd like to see that that was supported by the policy.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. So just to clarify, is that a question or are you proposing an amendment?
I'm raising the question, but I'm also flagging potentially an amendment to the motion.
Okay, thank you. Director Riali.
Through you, Mayor, the policy certainly could accommodate that. It's probably not clear or very specific at the moment. So an amendment probably is the best way to ensure it's included in the policy document itself.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you. Further question, if I may, Mayor. So the collection of bins for some people says all guided by a medical certificate as well. Can I just clarify that that is council generated, or is that with the contractor?
Through you, Mayor, council would actually be the approving body as to whether we could accept it, because even though it's picked up by a contractor, it still enters our waste management facility, our landfill, and council can't actually accept medical waste.
Yeah, thank you. No, sorry, that's the bin collection service where the driver goes to the door to collect. So that's guided by a medical certificate. Sorry, just for me to clarify.
Sorry, thanks for the clarification.
Bin collection service.
Through you, Mayor. So people do have to apply to council to actually have that bin collection service, and yes, they do need a certificate or a valid reason as to why they can't put their bins out, and then the council would approve the contractor to actually go and into the property to get the bins, because that is an additional charge to council for that service.
Thank you. That for me, that wasn't clearly spelt in the policy as well, and I'm wondering whether we can consider some addition to this policy in the future that does spell that out perhaps a little bit better. I'd further like to clarify the frequency of services. So just Director, if you can confirm that ratepayers who now have a weekly user pay service, that they have that arrangement directly with the contractor for the off week, so it doesn't need to be stated in the policy.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct, Alderman Dunsby, but that is actually done directly with the waste collection service contractor and not through council. So council does not provide a weekly collection service, but if residents would like an additional pickup, they can actually talk directly to the contractor to have that additional service.
Thank you. It's just that the policy talks about the proliferation of bins on the street, which obviously if people have undertaken that, it still happens, but they're in lesser numbers. So just making sure that was clarified within the policy. Just to speak to it, so they're my questions. So the other one, I just wanted to say, I was very pleased to see the small business engagement that they can choose to be involved and have the waste services from council. I'd like to say that's a really good move and commend you for including that in the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Just to clarify, you haven't moved an amendment. You would like to at this stage. You happy?
That's true. So yes, so my amendment would be to adopt the updated waste services policy in the form of attachment 2. Well, there is I have put it in an email through the executive officer.
Okay. So you'd like to move that amendment?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Someone, do I have someone to second the amendment once we bring it up on the screen? So I'll just read out the amendment that council adopt the updated waste service policy in the form of attachment 2 with the following amendments. A, in paragraph 13, replace the third bullet point and the paragraph after it with the following: upgrade of a general refuse MGB from 140 litres to 240 litres subject to paragraphs 14 and 15 below. B, insert new paragraphs 14 and 15 as follows. 14, an upgrade will only be permitted where both of the following apply. There are 5 or more people residing in the household, including members of the same family, and adequate evidence of this has been provided to council, e.g. a Medicare card, and the property owner has agreed to the upgrade and to pay the additional fee in accordance with council's schedules of fees and charges. 15, despite the requirements in paragraph 14, council may, at its discretion, approve an upgrade for households with less than 5 people in exceptional circumstances to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. And then renumber existing paragraphs 14 to 42 as paragraph 16 to 44.
Thank you, Mayor.
Excuse me, Mayor, can I ask a question, please, of the Director? How many people would we officially have now on medical exemption?
Through you, Mayor, it's a very small number. Probably count on one hand, let's say.
Right, and okay, so the next following question, if that's okay. Given the fact we had a question and answer meeting before this particular one, there didn't seem to be a view that we needed to be expressing the fact that you could get, I mean, we know you can get a medical certificate, but there didn't seem to be a need to change it when it was asked. In that there might be a flood.
Sorry, yeah, through you, Mayor. It's the issue about accepting medical waste. We can't actually accept medical waste, so we have to be, I guess, cautious or mindful on what we provide exemptions for, to not broaden the criteria where people can take that as just putting all sorts of medical waste in bins.
Yes, and that's my understanding of it too, that the officers wanted the flexibility to be able to respond on an individual basis.
Through you, Mayor, the amendment would probably provide that, because it does say to be assessed on a case by case basis.
That's good.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. So you moved the recommendation, Alderman Hickey, and Deputy Mayor seconded. So would you be happy to accept the amended recommendation, or
I thought some of it was a duplication, but if the officer's happy with it, then I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
you satisfied that would meet the operational?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. That would actually provide us with enough scope and discretion to make those assessments as required, because it does say in exceptional circumstances.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. So you're happy to accept the amended motion as the motion to be considered?
Given the officer's assurance that he's happy with it, yes.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor, you happy?
Just a question without opening Pandora's box. It said, I think, and I couldn't hardly read it from here because it was a family of 5 or more. What if there are tenants in the house as well? Do we have any room to move there, or is that just we're going to stick to families and Medicare cards? And if people have got a lease that shows there are 5 people living there.
Through you, Mayor, it does say family members or people in the household.
All people in the household.
Yeah, to recognise the fact they're probably not all part of the same family, but we would still need some sort of verification that they're all.
A lease or something like that, yeah.
So that amended as it is doesn't actually say that, does it? 5 or more
Yes.
people residing in
I
the
can't read it
household.
to the other side.
There are 5 or more people residing in the household, including members of the same family in brackets. So it could.
Does that give us enough room to move?
So,
Was that what the original said? I thought it said, I thought it covered both in the original.
It's through you, Mayor.
Yeah.
That wasn't what the original said. I've just updated the proposed motion there to say, for example, members of the same family rather than including, which I think captures the intent of the motion better. Or alternatively, we could just remove that example altogether and it would have the same effect.
Alderman Dunsby? He removed that part in brackets where it says members of the same family. Still meet the purpose that you're trying to achieve here?
I think the subsequent statement says, and adequate evidence that of this has been provided to council. So any adequate evidence, but yeah, if it's removed, it does make it easier to do rather than people feel they have to have it be on a Medicare card.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, the original wording in the report was if there's 5 or more people in the family or persons residing in the household.
That makes it clearer.
Yeah.
So perhaps if we can go back to the original wording. Yep, great. Happy with that, Alderman Hickey?
Yes, I think so. Given the nature of our community, which has a lot of multicultural residents who tend to have several generations in the one house. And also where we have a lot of people just having a room for a family due to costs.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I'm good with that.
Happy with that.
That covers everyone.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Fraser.
Question on item 40, which is an addition to the policy, I believe. I'll read it. So where it is impractical, in the opinion of the Waste Services Coordinator, to provide a standard or shared collection service to a multiple dwelling property. So where it is impractical to deliver a service to a multiple dwelling property, then council at its discretion may require applicants to utilise an independent waste service provider to collect the waste, recycling and photo, etc. I am curious about whether we can be given a nice pragmatic example of where that's likely to happen, please.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. The example would be that a development might occur on a steep hill, and where subdivision of land occurs. Some of the houses are possibly pole houses, and a normal waste collection truck may not be able to access that site easily. So there may need to be a different collection point and maybe a different sort of bin provided, and a special truck that actually picks up those bins, like a front loader or a reloader type truck. In those circumstances, we'll actually assess it at the time the planning application comes in, and normally the planners will refer these matters to our waste services staff to look at and consider, and a decision would be made at that point whether we could actually service that development or recommend for the development to organise their waste service.
Right. So follow-up question. So just to clarify, a planning approval would not be given in this situation without the person seeking the approval knowing that this is the proviso is that they would need private waste collection services. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor, when the development would be assessed, if a decision's made that we won't be able to service it, the developer would be notified at that point that they would have to provide their own waste collection service.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, this is sort of an expression of frustration with this council in that we have several meetings around these issues, as we did earlier tonight, and the general public don't get to understand how the aldermen come to the actual decision that we make, because we do ask questions such as the one my fellow alderman just asked, and then we follow on with, should these developments be allowed to go ahead if they cannot get a garbage truck, they may not be able to get a fire truck. So we were reassured that there are other ways around that too, given the pressure on us to develop land and forever encroaching up the mountain. So, the meetings about issues like this, I do not understand why we cannot have open workshops where the members of the public can hear what we're discussing, because certainly nothing there was outrageous or controversial in any way. And I think it's important that the public know how we are working behind the scenes. Well, we shouldn't be doing it behind the scenes. In my opinion, we should be actually, sharing our work with the general public so they can have full confidence in this council that there is a lot of scrutiny that goes into some of these decisions before we get to this point.
Is that a question, Alderman Hickey?
No, it was a firm statement, Mayor.
You open debate, so if you could try and phrase that in a question, otherwise
Well,
you'll just close.
could we please have a workshop on how we do workshops so that we can be more open and accountable to the public? Question mark.
General Manager? Question on could we have workshops? A workshop on how we do workshops? Is that your question?
That's exactly the question.
Take that one on notice, General Manager.
Yep.
Any further discussion on the item? Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support the recommendations as we see on the screen. Just had a couple of quick questions in relation to the structure of the policy. This policy is in our new format, makes it a bit easier to read, but one thing I couldn't find on the policy is how long the life of this policy is expected to be. So in the document control, and it might just be my screen, we've got the commencement date, but not the cycle or when it's due for review next. I'm wondering if that's somewhere else in the document, if that's been missed off in this template.
Through you, Mayor, on the marked up, the one with the track changes, it has got 4 years from council resolution date. It may not have transferred through to the actual clean copy, so I'll ensure that is actually included. So it's a 4-year policy review date.
Okay, so that's just an attachment too. And in reading the policy, and the reason why I'm asking about the length of this particular policy before it's up for review, we're looking at a period of time where the waste levy is going to be coming in, and while it doesn't necessarily apply to the types of areas that we've got in this policy, whether that will need to appear in the policy in some way, in saying what does that waste levy actually look like in terms of council's waste collection and waste operations. So part of the 4 years is we don't really know at this stage. When the waste levy comes out, we'll have a clearer picture on the impact of that on our waste collection and waste acceptance.
Through you, Mayor. So if I could make a comment on that, it's actually a very good point. The policy, whilst due for review every 4 years, probably might go through that full duration, because we've recognised that there will need to be some further considerations with the container deposit scheme and the waste levy introduction. However, we did identify a few issues that are starting to emerge at the moment, hence the reason it's up for review at the moment. It's still, I think it was only reviewed a couple of years ago, and it's back here to plug these identified issues. I have no doubt we'll be back here again before that full cycle to cover off on those other matters as they emerge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Any further discussion of the item? I had a couple of questions, if I may, Director. So I too echo Alderman Carlton's comment around it's great to see that we are now, or it might have been Alderman Dunsby actually, around including small business, the opportunity for small businesses where they're producing domestic quantities of waste to access our collection services, and also sporting clubs. And I remember when we prepared our waste management strategy a couple of years ago, I advocated quite strongly that we include in there mechanisms around encouraging and supporting sporting clubs to better separate their waste. So I'm really pleased to see that in there. A question I have around that in particular in relation to sporting clubs is have we or can we consider going forward how we write that into lease agreements? I guess it's a bit of a rhetorical question. That's one. And the other is around the ownership. So I note that it says where it is a sort of an opt-in service, it requires that owner approval is granted if the organisation requesting it isn't the owner. So in the case of sporting clubs, often the owner of the facility is council, is us. So I guess that would be the sporting clubs liaising with through our property team for council to support that. Is that how you anticipate that working?
Mayor, we'd probably have to clarify that, because I think it is actually mostly aimed at property owners like residents or business owners to actually authorise the application for bins or to opt into the service. I think consideration hasn't been given on council facilities where the council is the actual owner, so I'll have to probably investigate that a bit further and provide clarification on that point.
Yep. But obviously we would be supportive of it. Another question that I have is in relation to the relationship between, I note that we have this waste policy and there's a strong relationship with our environmental amenity bylaw of 2017, and the document references that a couple of times, as well as the standards for multiple dwellings. So there's a couple of documents referenced there. I know when we have development applications for consideration at our Glenorchy Planning Authority meeting, sometimes there are conditions in relation to waste service arrangements, but the policy before us doesn't make reference to the relationship between our policy and development applications and any conditions on permits that we grant as a council. So one question I'm keen to know is what weight do those conditions have when we do, as a planning authority, have conditions on planning approvals? And two, how can we be assured that the policy is strong enough to communicate that internally and externally?
The planning scheme, if there's a condition that is put on a development application and it's consistent with the planning scheme, it is fully enforceable. The policy's been developed and put in place to actually cover off on items that probably aren't totally covered under the planning scheme. Things like placement of bins, on curbs, collection times, the driver pickup service, those sort of things aren't covered in the scheme. So it does actually try to bridge any gaps that might exist. So the items that are covered in the planning scheme are enforceable, and because this policy is covered under a council resolution, then yes, it does carry quite a lot of weight and is also enforceable.
Thank you. Given that I'm very supportive of the updates to this policy, I think that we have opportunity as a council to do even more in relation to sporting clubs and community organisations and businesses within our municipality to support them to better separate their waste. And I do have some faith that they will be incentivised to do that through the introduction of the waste levy in July 2022 that the state government's bringing in, which is aimed at discouraging people from sending waste to landfill. So I'm really hopeful that will help, but I think also we can do more to encourage, and this is an example of us starting to take some of those steps to encourage non-residential facilities and organisations to better separate waste, which is better for the environment. So I look forward to us continually making improvements in this area, and as we're doing now, updating this policy as opportunities arise. Any further discussion of the item? No, I will go back to the mover, Alderman Hickey.
No, I think it's been well debated. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. I'll put the recommendation that we adopt, the amended recommendations up there on the screen. To the vote, please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 11, updated council policies. A recommendation, 5 recommendations before us that council adopt 5 updated policies. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Alderman Hickey, someone to second? Or Deputy Mayor, Alderman Hickey.
Thank you, Mayor. I recommend that we adopt these as discussed. I do have a couple of questions. Can I address
Sure.
those now? Right, so on page 32, which is why I like page numbering, we have consultations that were with the Alderman, Executive Leadership Team, Access Advisory Committee, Corporate Government, People and Culture and Council Officers. Should we not include there, just for clarity, where necessary, government bodies? Because there's often external government bodies that we might need to refer to, as we did with the, I think it was access and inclusion policy around what was the latest version of terminology, etc.
Sure. Director, would you like to respond? Or you just like that included, that noted?
Yes, you happy with that? Yes. And the other thing too, good pick up by Alderman Carlton earlier about that document not having 4-year review. I noticed we have it on the risk management policy, but it wasn't on one of the other documents that I had here. And I'm just wondering if the officers could check that all policies have that updated. It's like a few have different templates. For example, the access policy does not have the 4-year review on it. So that was a good pick up. That's more a statement. The next thing I'd like to discuss too, this is another case of where a lot of discussion and work has gone into reviewing these policies, particularly the community engagement one, which was quite a long and lengthy and a very important discussion for this council to have, because the policy was very outdated, and more so the access one, where we put in about people having literacy and numeracy, lacking those skills, and saying that it was important this council recognised in its communication and providing information that we address those issues as they're so significant in our community. So overall, again, I would like to say that all of the discussions we had around that, there was nothing that I would have perceived as being confidential, and no need for it not to be. in full discussion in front of the public, even if it's only via a video link, that people can see how these things are being discussed and thrashed out by their alderman.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to focus a little bit on the community engagement policy and through you, Mayor, ask some questions around the process that we've gone through with this particular policy, given that there's been a lot of outside influence on it, around, particularly around the Local Government Act. The policy was due for review some time ago. So if we can just get an update from the Director around some of those influences and how they've impacted on this particular policy.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Director.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. I'll start at the start, shall I? For members of the community who are listening and for Alderman, the community engagement policy was adopted by Council in 2017 and was due in the current cycle of reviewing. As officers started to look at that process going forward, we were aware that the current state government, when they came to power, looked at reviewing the Local Government Act. At that time, that review included reviewing how council were making their decision processes, specifically addressing community engagement in that process. The state government, as they progressed with their review of the Local Government Act, had started to draft some language around what that meant for community engagement for local government. And prior to COVID, so we're talking in the first quarter of 2020, they had produced some language that started to address what that might look like going forward. We then just put pause on the review of our community engagement policy, knowing that if the state government had included language in the revised Local Government Act, we would be bound to then follow that with our process for our community engagement policy ourselves. As we know, COVID happened during that period and the Local Government Act review stalled during that process. The Local Government Act has not continued to be reviewed at this time, and the state government has had other processes that they put in place to review what is happening in the local government sector. So it left us with an interesting conundrum. Do we engage in going through that process to review the policy, or do we wait until that Local Government Act is reviewed and giving us direction going forward? Compounding that was our own audit panel asking that this policy be reviewed. So we were in the conundrum of not having clear direction from the state government as to what that language might look like, and we were not keen to invest in resources to go through a full engagement and review of that policy, because it needs to be deep, it needs to be meaningful with our community to do that. However, our audit panel required some action from us to review the existing policy and framework that we have. So what officers have put forward before council is a review of the language that's in the existing policy, and that's what's before us today. What I would, if I had my crystal ball working beautifully, I would predict that the Local Government Review the Local Government Act review may not gain any traction in the coming months or perhaps years. So council may choose to make a decision going into the next annual plan to review our community engagement framework fully. And that's where we're at this time. Does that answer the question?
It does, and it leads to some other questions. So it's an interesting situation in that if we adopt the policy tonight, the life of that policy, I believe, is 4 years. But what I'm hearing is that with the resources we had and the situation we were faced with, we've done quite a bit of work on the policy. There's some significant improvements, but there's more that we can do in terms of reviewing that policy more, as you said, more fully. So that's the bit that I was a bit uncomfortable in that. I could see that there was significant improvement, but we hadn't really gone to the level that I felt that council officers or council could go to if we had the opportunity of more time. So, Mayor, I guess I'm speaking to the motion now. So, in hearing what you've had to say, and I acknowledge the work that's gone into it, I do feel uncomfortable that we've got a 4-year review here, where I do feel that there is an opportunity to look at building that into our annual plan in the next financial year to enable our staff to do a full review, which would include consulting with the community. So I think that we would actually end up with a better product if we did adopt this particular policy as an improvement or an update, and then look to doing a full review in the next annual plan.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton.
So am I able to add a amend the motion, the recommendation that the community engagement policy in attachment 2 is adopted as a update with a full review to be considered in the 21-22 financial year.
22-23.
Attachment 6, apologies, thank you.
To be considered
In the annual plan for 34. Time does fly.
Sure. So when you say to be considered, just to clarify, to be considered as part of our the development of the annual plans? Or
Yeah.
would that be more appropriate wording?
Yeah, thank you. My wording definitely needed some fine tuning there.
Development of councils. Yeah. Thank you. We just changed the if to an of. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Sure. Thank you. Alderman Hickey, you moved the motion, seconded. Deputy Mayor, are you happy to support that amendment?
Yep.
So we take that as the motion being considered.
Can I speak to the motion, to the amendment?
No, you will close debate if you speak to it. You may ask a question.
Okay.
You will get the opportunity to speak in closing debate though. So I just, would you like to?
Well, I'll go with the question. Is it possible that I can convey great support to Alderman Carlton for doing that, because as I have been in this council and prior to my confirmation of being an alderman, have been a noisy and outspoken person criticising the extent of our community engagement, and I do see this as just a short step on the ladder, and I do acknowledge that the officers have assured me that it is a high priority that we get better as a council engaging with our community on very important issues. Question mark.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Fraser.
Just a question to get some clarification on privacy of submissions. Just let me find it. The privacy of submissions made during the community engagement process. There's a track change part here in the attachments. It says all submissions received as part of a community engagement process will be considered as available, and then it's got as available the person making the submission. So there's obviously a grammatical error in there somewhere, but I just wanted to get some clarification on will the submissions be publicly available, publicly and freely available, or will they only be made available on request? case.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. I think I picked up the same, and if you go to the clean version, that sentence is fully removed. Is that right?
And what does this say? I should have got it.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, because I picked up the same thing. So I went to the clean version to see what it actually said.
Clean version.
The non-track change version. So now it says.
Oh, it comes immediately after. So.
Privacy and community engagement. Council is committed to protecting the personal information of all participants of its community engagement process. In demonstrating this commitment, Council will be guided by the personal information protection principles listed in Schedule 1 of the Personal Information Protection Act 2004. Personal information collected in public meetings or any engagement activity will only be used for the purpose of ongoing engagement on the issue by Council. Such information will not be made available to the public.
That's it?
That's it.
It has additional
Yes. So that
information to track change. Obviously, that wasn't included in the final document
final.
for some reason. Okay. No worries. Thank you.
Good pick up. Any further discussion or questions? No? I'd just like to add that I'm supportive of adopting the updated policies presented to us tonight. In relation to the community engagement one, I too am supportive of the addition there. Thank you to Alderman Carlton for raising that and for asking the questions about why Council has taken the approach it has with this particular update of the community engagement policy. Obviously, it's quite a significant task to undertake to properly engage with our community on community engagement, on how they would like to be engaged with, and if we're going to do it, we want to do it properly. There hasn't been budget allocated within this year's annual budget. It's not a task that's identified in our annual plan. Therefore, but in saying that, we are always open as a council to continually improving our community engagement and always open to ideas and feedback from the public on how we can do it better. We don't necessarily, we're not necessarily able to change what we do just based on criticism. We need ideas and solutions rather than criticism. So I welcome those ideas and solutions from members of the public anytime, and we most definitely are open to adapting what we do within our resource constraints, which is a challenge. Council's community engagement has improved significantly since I was first elected as an alderman almost 4 years ago. Whilst I acknowledge Mr. Alderton's questions and perhaps concerns raised earlier tonight during public question time around the level of engagement that we get through the Let's Talk platform, 690 people is 690 people more than we're engaging with council for 4 years ago, in my view. So we did not have a platform like that previously, and people's participation often extended to coming along and asking questions in public question time. I also note what a challenge it is to engage our community, and I reflect that before I was elected as an alderman, I certainly wasn't proactively looking for opportunities to comment on council's sport and recreation strategy or council's dog management policy, even though they were areas of interest to me. So it is very difficult to get people to find the time and to have the interest to engage in what we do as a council when they elect us as elected representatives to make decisions on their behalf. And it's our role as aldermen to be getting out there talking to the community to get a sense of what's important and what their views are on things. As I say though, always willing to listen to feedback and ideas, and we can always improve. Continual growth and improvement is something we are most definitely committed to as a council. I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Hickey.
Yes, just before we close the debate then, Mayor, I'd just like to clarify something that's been said tonight, and that is that there's 690 odd people using the Let's Talk, and some of the pie graphs we've received have been less than 15 people. So having that many people who have gone on to Let's Talk doesn't mean they're actually using it. So But as we said, the officers have acknowledged that there's limitations and that we need to probably advertise that service more and get to people who are digitally challenged or can't use those kind of services for some other reason. So I'd like to say let's go ahead and adopt the amendment and then incorporate it into the motion.
Thank you. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for the recommendation. That is carried unanimously. Moving on then to item 12, Audit Panel Chair's Annual Report 2020 to 2021. We have recommendations that Council receive and note the report and direct the General Manager to provide a copy of the report to the Minister for Local Government. Do I have someone to move? Alderman Bull. Someone to second? Alderman Ryan. Alderman Bull.
I'll open it up for discussion, but yes, I support the Audit Panel Chair's report that he has submitted, and for the General Manager to forward that report to the Minister of Local Governments. I'll open to the floor if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Bull. Any discussion of the item? Alderman Ryan.
I'd just like to say, as a member of the audit panel, that it was a fairly uneventful year, which is what we want on the audit panel. We continue to meet the ministerial directions that were issued in 2018. I think there were a few delays because of the COVID situation, but there was nothing crucial. And I think some of those delays were only by the Tasmanian Audit Office fault and not ours. And generally just want to thank the executive team and the independent members of the panel for their time and work over the year.
Thank you, Alderman Ryan. I have a couple of questions, if I may. The annual report notes that the internal audit program for 2020 to 21 included a number of audits, and one of those was the asset management maturity audit, among a range of others. I just wonder if and how those audits are provided to Council. General Manager.
Refer that to the Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you. Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. The audit reports are presented to the audit panel meetings as and when they fall due. We try to have those audit reports available and the auditor actually present them to the panel as well to discuss any areas of concern. We continue to note the areas for improvement and maintain those on a database and a spreadsheet. And as those actions are completed, they're removed from the spreadsheet. So we continue to monitor on a regular basis.
So they come to Council as minuted rather than in full.
That's right. Yes.
Yep. Thank you. And my other question is in relation to providing a copy of the report to the Minister for Local Government. I note that the report says that in June 2020, the General Manager and the Manager of Corporate Governance met with officers of the Local Government Division, and it was agreed that the Audit Panel's Chair's annual report to Council would also be forwarded to the Minister in compliance of Council's annual reporting under Directive 7. So I just want a clarification around would also be. Is there something else that we are required to provide to the Minister, or my understanding was this report in itself satisfied that directive is. So I just wanted clarity on that. Because it then says it is therefore anticipated that this report will constitute the final required report under the ministerial directions.
Through you, Mayor, I have our Manager of Corporate Governance, Tracy Ehrlich, who may wish to expand the response for that for you. Tracy.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. There's no other information required at the moment to be forwarded through to the Minister for Local Government. The Audit Panel Chair's report is the sole report that we provide, and the agreement that was reached back in 2020 was that they would receive the 2 audit panel chair reports and then would advise us if they had any further requirements. So we will be awaiting the response of the Minister with interest now.
Okay, thank you. General Manager?
I think also that this, and again, clearly this is a report that's independent of staff, so we don't editorialise the chair's comments. But my take on the comments is that what the word also has been used to refer to, in addition to providing this report to council, the report will be provided to the Minister. So I don't think it's inferring an additional, a further requirement, inferring that the report is going to serve 2 purposes.
Sure. Good. That makes sense. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Tracy. Any further discussion of the item? No, I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Ball.
Nothing further, thank you.
Put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That is carried unanimously. Moving on to item 13, Financial Performance Report, 31st of August 2021. We have recommendation that Council receive and note the report for the year to date ending 31st of August 2021. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Alderman Fraser. Someone to second? Alderman Ball. Alderman Fraser.
Thank you, Mayor. Because this is a fairly uneventful financial performance report, given that we're only a few months into the new financial year, but happily, even at this point, we are about $500,000 better off than was budgeted. It's due to a combination of factors, but here's to hoping that that can continue for the rest of the financial year.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. Any further discussion of the item? If not, I'll put the recommendation. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. It's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 14, Procurement and Contracts Monthly Report. Recommendation that we receive and note the report for 17th of August to 14th of September. Do I have someone to move this item, please? Alderman Richardson, someone to second? Alderman Fraser. Alderman Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Only one exemption between 17th of August and 14th September, and that was for IT Technology 1 upgrade, which was budgeted for. We have 202,000, so no concerns with that, that's fine.
Thank you, Alderman Richardson. Any further discussion of the item? I'll put the motion. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That is carried unanimously. Item 15, notices of motions, questions on notice and without notice. We have an answer in the minutes to a question taken on notice from Alderman Fraser in relation to, does the General Manager know how many Glenorchy City Council employees have been vaccinated at this point, and what are we doing to encourage more employees to get vaccinated? Alderman
Just
Fraser.
clarify, not just vaccinated, but vaccinated for COVID-19. We had a vaccination for yellow fever.
Thank you for the clarification. So the answer is included in the agenda, but I'll just note that the number of employees vaccinated at the date of the council meeting was 43, and the date of publication of the agenda, the number had risen to 57. Council doesn't require employees to report their vaccination, and some have chosen not to or simply forgot to advise council perhaps. So the actual number of staff vaccinated is likely to be higher than this, and of course council encourages staff to report whether they are vaccinated or not, but is legally unable to require mandatory reporting of vaccinations by employees.
Can I ask a question?
A further question, Alderman Hickey?
I know it's a further, a further question to Alderman Fraser's question.
How many staff do we have?
We've got 250 full-time equivalents.
So
it's about 300 if you take into account part-time staff.
that seems to be an incredibly low percentage. So, follow-on question, what are we doing to encourage staff to be vaccinated?
Through you, Mayor, the situation as it's stated in the response to the question is that we believe that there's significant underreporting of the number of vaccinations that have indeed occurred. But we cannot require staff to tell us if they've been vaccinated or not. We suspect that there may be some hesitancy around concerns that if there is a further outbreak of the pandemic here, that staff may feel reluctant to be put in harm's way, if you like, notwithstanding they might be double vaccinated. But we don't. That's simply a supposition on our part. We don't know why reporting numbers are so low. But we certainly continue to remind staff or seek their indication as to their status.
Thank you, General Manager. Alderman Ball.
Yes, to the General Manager, if I may. If that's the case, and you can't ask, because I think you said it was unlawful, how can businesses then say, like say David Walsh, go and say that if you're going to work here, you have to be vaccinated? Is that not also unlawful then in your terms?
Through you, Mayor, I can't comment on other firms, but I'm certainly not saying that we can't ask. What I'm saying is we can't require people to tell us.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you, General Manager. I assume different employers have different contracts and contractual arrangements and agreements with their staff, and that's a matter for them.
My comment was because about the unlawful. How can it be unlawful for the council and it can't be for another institution?
Looks like our Director of Corporate Services is chomping at the bit to answer your question.
Thank you. Some institutions will mandate it through their, as Mona has, council have that advice that it's not lawful for us to do that. And in fact, today there's been a ruling from the Fair Work Commission on a test case for a flu vaccination from last year that the Commissioner was scathing of the company mandating that it was apartheid in vaccination to insist staff be vaccinated. So it'll be a space that we watch carefully over the next period of time. Those people who have determined that they are fully customer focused and wish to mandate in their organisation that they want staff fully vaccinated is a path that they are treading at the moment. We're taking advice through Legat as well as to what that might look like. And for us, there is no clear position to mandate vaccinations for council staff. But as at today's report, we had 72 people vaccinated, so more people are starting to report. And the fact that more vaccinations have become available and the age demographic of our staff, it will pick up over time for those people who do report to us.
And is that a stage 1 vaccination or fully vaccinated?
Double dose.
Double dose, thank you. Thanks for the answer.
Thank you. Alderman
This is
Fraser.
also going to make the comment that it's potentially, I can see it as a business continuity risk. Borders will reopen in the next few months. More than likely, COVID is going to spread quite freely through our community. And I would suggest that if a large percentage of Glenorchy City Council's employees are not vaccinated, potentially it could really affect the council's ability to deliver its services, potentially. So it's just another way of looking at it, I guess, as a risk to the organisation.
Yes, we're certainly planning carefully for business continuity. So our focus at the moment is what might occur in the event of the Delta strain being spread in the community, and we're certainly taking active steps including testing our IT arrangements in terms of work from home with various teams, and identifying what our essential service requirements might be in the event that there's an outbreak of the Delta variant in Tasmania. And clearly, we will then need to move very quickly from there, as will the rest of the community, to this planning for what happens as we approach the 80 or 90% vaccination numbers. But you're correct, we would love to, and we believe there's significant underreporting, but we're not in a position to require people to divulge that information.
Just a point, if I may, I note that my younger children in their 20s have only just been able to get their first injection because of the age thing, and one in their 30s has just had one, and the oldest one's had two. So age does make a difference at the moment as well. It is difficult getting in even. So I'm not sure what the age demographic of our council is, but
There is a email out that I've received today to say that as of the 2nd, Pfizer and anyone can go 12 and up.
yeah, like Moderna. I've got got Moderna.
Just to acknowledge our meeting procedure regulations here. So do you have another a question, Alderman Paul or Alderman King, or just just comments? Just comments. Thank you. Any further questions without notice?
There is one from Alderman Sims here, but I don't know if it can be asked because she's not here. She sent that email in, so whether...
I'll just seek some clarification. So Alderman Sims has sent questions without notice at 5:43 p.m. General Manager, shall we table those? Table those?
Can you table
here they are.
those?
Yes, well, they are up on the screen here. Thank you. So I guess just to note, in our agenda, we do have an answer to a question without notice from Alderman Sims in relation to the CBD revitalisation project. And there's an answer in relation to that, in response to that question that was asked at the last meeting in our agenda. So these are some follow-up questions to that question. Please provide all the aldermen with copies of all written communication that's been provided to businesses throughout the CBD developments and ongoing changes, updates. In light of Council's miscommunication to the public regarding the timelines and budget for the CBD development, why are we continuing to communicate the headline that we have delivered this project on time and in budget? Okay, so a number of questions there. Would we take those on notice, General Manager?
I think it's just a point of order there. Based on previous conversations we've had, that little question of council's miscommunication, I understood that we'd clarified that that hadn't been miscommunication, or is that still a point of contention?
Well, through you, Mayor, the situation is that we have identified a timeline for this project. I believe probably 3 years ago there was some adjustment to the timeframes. I need to go back and look at the particulars of it, but we've been working to the same timeframe for at least a couple of years now, and our comments in relation to on time and budget are really based on that situation.
Well, I guess my point of order was that we have we not already answered that question in the last council meeting?
The question in relation to the timelines and budget is answered in, or the timeline is answered in the response in the agenda tonight. At its meeting on 29th of June 2020, Council was advised that Stage 3C would not be completed within the timeframe envisaged. The report from June 2020 adjusted the milestone for Stage 3C to November 2021. We've outlined the reasons there as per the project report, and the Council has continued to communicate with local businesses throughout the project and with our community, and consistently communicated the timelines reported to Council.
So it's not a miscommunication, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah,
I think Alderman Fraser pointed out before that it was communicated correctly.
I'd probably move a point of order on the question 4 as well. I'm not sure that council officers should be expected to respond to a fairly politically charged question like that. I'm not sure that it's terribly relevant to the council.
Okay, thank you. Point of order, Alderman King upheld and Alderman Fraser upheld as well. So we will take those other questions on notice. Any further questions without notice? Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. Just this was a question that I asked earlier, but just wanted to have it as part of tonight's official proceedings. Just an update on Council's actions relating to the High Court decision around social media and responsibility for comments that are made on our page. So just an update on the actions that Council have already taken and what we're going to be doing in response to that.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton.
I'll
General Manager.
I'll defer that question there to the Executive Officer.
Thank you for the question, Alderman Cullen, through you, Mayor. Yes, we're very well aware of the High Court decision. Our communications officer picked it up, I think, before just about anyone else in the media or elsewhere. The actions that we're taking are that we will, as the Premier has said that he will do turn-off comments on some posts where we think the topic is likely to be controversial or to incite a debate which could offend those principles and potentially leave us liable. We have and will continue to moderate all of our Facebook comments in accordance with our terms of service. If those are breached, the comment is typically either hidden or deleted, and the person who made the comment notified that their comment offended our Facebook terms and conditions and has been either hidden or deleted. We'll continue to maintain that practice in addition to occasionally turning off the comments on posts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Officer. Any further questions without notice? Or motions without notice?
Move to go into closed council.
Move to go into closed council. Moved Deputy Mayor. Someone to second. Alderman Ball. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. It's carried unanimously. Closes the open part of our council meeting at 8 p.m. Thank you to members of the public for attending tonight, and thank you to members of the public and to those who viewed our live stream on Facebook or on our website. And thank you for your patience in the delay in getting our meeting started. We'll see you next time.